I was asked to look at U1A8, so that is looking at solving polynomial inequalities without a graph. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to use the graph to help me here. So I'm going to ask, when is this equation here, x minus 3, x plus 2 all squared greater than or equal to 0? So when is this positive? So we look over here. What does that mean? What we want to know is here. Remember that positive intervals where the function is above the x-axis are the solutions to this. So what you're asking is this: when f at x is greater than this, or when is y greater than this? So let's go back to grade 10 and 11. We're looking at when is this function, when does this have a y value greater than 0? Okay, so let's look at this and cheat here for a second. I threw this into Desmos. So when is it greater than 0? When do we have positive y values here? Well, there's my equation. And let me just make sure that it's the right one before I move on. X minus 3, x plus 2 all squared, x minus 3, x plus 2 all squared. Good. And I want to know, when is it positive? And the answer is, well, it's positive or equal to. Also, be careful with that too, because if we look here, if we go back here, it's greater than or equal to. So anytime we touch here, that's fine also. So positive or equal to, sorry, greater than or equal to 0 means that the y values are positive. So it's anything up here. So basically anything to the left of 0, less than 0 is fine for my x values. Anything to the right or greater than 3 is fine. So let's see how we came up with that if we couldn't graph. So what you do is you start off with the x-intercepts or the zeros, and you make a table based on those. So I have one intercept at x, one at x minus 3, and then 2 at x plus 2. So a double at x plus 2. So when I set up my graph, or set up my table here, what I do is coming down here, I put my factors, x minus 3, x plus 2, and x plus 2. Do the x plus 2 twice. Remember that twice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and say, okay, my zeros are at 0, 3, and negative 2. So the smallest of these, so how do I get that? That's here. If I factor this and I want this whole thing to equal to 0, x is equal to 0. Here, x minus 3 is equal to 0, x is equal to 3. Here, x plus 2 is 0, x is minus 2. So then we look at these numbers 0, negative 2, and 3, and we put them in order because we want to look at the intervals here. So the smallest is negative 2 of this, or the most negative number is negative 2. So I say, hey, I'm going to be looking at numbers. I'm going to look at the numbers left of negative 2. And then my biggest number is 3. And I'm also going to be looking at the numbers greater than 3. So back at Desmos, that means, look, here's negative 2. I want to look at these numbers here, over here, and then I want to look at these numbers here. Now, how do I deal with the numbers in the middle here? Well, my next zero after negative 2 is at 0. So the next group of numbers that I want to look at are between the zeros at negative 2 and 0, or between negative 2 and 0 right here. So I want to look at x values that are greater than negative 2 but less than 0. Okay, so that covers these numbers here. Okay, so let's look here. And then the next little bit here is here between 0 and 3. So how do I write that? How do I write 0 and 3? I say 0 is less than x is less than 3. So I make a table based like this, and then I'm going to see, okay, if I had numbers that are less than 2, let's start here. If I have numbers that are less than negative 2, I'm sorry, what would the values be in my factors, all 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if I could figure out the sign of the factors here, okay, because you'll have the same consistent sign here, then you can figure out the overall sign. So let's just look at this for a second real quick. So if I have x is less than negative 2, if I had a value of x less than negative 2, what would my sign be of each of these factors? This one, and this one. And all you have to do is come up with a number less than negative 2. And I think the more extreme you go, the better. So if I have negative 10, then x is negative, right? If I have negative 10 here, then not minus 10 subtract negative 3 is also negative. If I have negative 10 here, then I have negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8, negative, and again negative. So any number here put in that is less than negative 2, all of these guys here will be negative. Okay, and then you ask yourself this: if I'm multiplying a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative, overall I will have a positive sign to my function. Okay, so my y value, or my f at x sign, will be positive. Then in this little group here, you have -2 to 0. So a nice little number to think, of between -2 and 0. If you can get a whole number, it's great. Let's use -1. So if I sub in -1 for x, I get a negative answer, right? If I sub in -1 for here x minus 3, I get -1 minus 3 is -4, so it's negative. -1 plus 2 is positive. You say, okay, big deal. Just for that one, well, anything in here will be positive. If I have 0.00001 plus 2 is positive. If I go all the way to negative 1.99999, almost all the way to 2, it'll be something positive in here, so this guy's going to be positive. But just use a number in the middle. It'll work for all of them, okay? As long as you're using the intervals properly, -1 will work. And then again, if that's positive, then that's positive. So now I have a negative times a negative times a positive times a positive. And if I do that, so that's saying this is negative, this is negative, this is positive twice, okay? Because we're going to expand this as x plus 2 times x plus 2. And so it's negative times a negative times a positive is positive. Okay, I want to go to the next one here, 0 and 3. Interval is between 0 and 3. Let's use 1, okay, or 2. It doesn't matter. If I use 2, 2 is positive. 2 minus 3 is negative. 2 plus 2 is positive. 2 plus 2 is positive. Now I have a positive, a negative, a positive, a positive. When I multiply all those together, I get a negative. Okay, and then here, greater than 3, use 4, positive, 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 everything's positive, therefore positive. So overall, this interval is positive, this interval is positive, this interval is negative, and this interval is positive. And then if you say, wait, hold on, what about the equal to? Well, the equal to, right, I have x is less than -2, and then I have this interval here between -2 and 0. What about x being -2? But that's my 0. Okay, so if over here, my 0 is at -2. So I'm above here, and then I approach here, and I touch, and then I stay above. And why do I stay above here? Let's go back here. Why do I stay above? Because I'm positive between -2 and 0. So between -2 and 0, I'm positive. So I'm positive here. Then my little table here says that between 0 and 3, I'm negative. So I come down, and then after 3 or above 3, I'm positive. That's what the graph says. Let's look back, and that's what it says here. Okay, so that's tying in the graph with the table. Hope that made sense. Take care.